So my first major story is from Axios DC. This actually was published in April 14th, 2025. I know we've talked a lot about the Michelin Guide on this podcast, and I didn't know about this story specifically. And so the story is basically Not Worth the Stars: Why Virginia Said No to Michelin. And I think the framework of this for this story is that Virginia was offered to be a part of the Michelin Guide. I It's interesting, right? It's interesting because I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, but the Michelin Guide sometimes charges cities or tourism boards to bring the Michelin Guide to their region, especially in new regions, obviously. So these arrangements are often labeled as partnerships or promotional agreements, and the payments help cover the cost of inspectors, logistics, and launching the guide. In return, cities get global culinary visibility and a level of prestige. Now, it's important to note, and Justin had made this point, that just because Michelin comes to your city doesn't mean you automatically get a starred restaurant. It simply means that the restaurants in your city are being reviewed. And so what I found, or your state for that matter, for Virginia. So basically the story behind this is that Virginia is notably absent from the forthcoming Southern Restaurant Guide that Michelin announced back in April, which we had covered. And so Axios goes on to say why it matters. The state tourism office declined to participate in the pay-to-play guide, which is interesting how they worded that. A whopping $360,000 to be included. And the big picture they share is that a Michelin star is one of the restaurant world's top honors, as we all know. In recent years, Michelin's American coverage has often been contingent on which tourism board ponies up cash. The payments, dubbed partnership money, started with a $600,000 payout from Visit California in 2019, which the Michelin Guide's director told the New York Times helped offset the cost of reviews. So for Virginia tourism officials, declining a deal with Michelin came down to money, a $120,000 payment over 3 years. Payments over 3 years, leading to that total amount. So the decision was also about responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars. VTC is a state-funded organization, and so basically, what's interesting is that when Michelin launched in DC, which is close to Virginia, they never had to pay for coverage. Michelin spokesperson tells Axios, as in this article, that while the organization works with destination marketing organizations in some areas, this is not the case for all Michelin guides, and there are no partnerships in the district, including for last year's hotel guide. But Michelin's presence in DC, they continue, isn't just about great restaurants. Upon its launch, Michelin's then international director, Michael Ellis, told Washingtonian that Michelin's tire business, ironically its bread and butter, was a factor in picking destinations. And so for basically, Axios then goes and speaks to a bunch of high-profile Virginia chefs, and who they spoke with, they were okay with the Old Dominion's decision. In Staunton, two-time James Beard finalist Ian Bowden runs the kind of ambitious destination restaurants, The Shack and Maud and the Bear, that Michelin might award. A star would help business, Bowden tells Axios, but he also admits he's tired of shelling out to food festivals and publications for exposure. And then he goes on to say, I'm kind of proud of the state for saying F that to Michelin. So it's interesting, right? This idea, I don't think the general public, and I don't even know if a lot of people in the food industry realize that Michelin operates a lot of the times on a pay-to-play scheme. I shouldn't say scheme. Pay-to-play contract partnership. Not for every city, but especially for newer cities, what they do is they look to the tourism board to fund the guide to come there and review their restaurants. And the argument you can make for Michelin is it brings prestige. If you get a Michelin-starred restaurant, then people will obviously travel there, and so on and so forth. What is interesting, though, is that, and I can see the argument for it, because at the end of the day, like I said, you're not guaranteed a starred restaurant. So you could pay for this and have Michelin, give their recommendations, their big gourmands, but never give a star. But at the same point, if the state of Virginia pays for Michelin to rate their restaurants, and they pay for them to be reviewed, and basically you are guaranteed a star, then doesn't that discredit the validity and the integrity of the guide? Isn't it then just pay to play? So I don't necessarily think that states or tourism boards paying for Michelin to come to their state or their city isn't, I don't think that's something that's like pay to play where like Michelin's integrity has been, upended. And I do understand that Michelin has to pay its workers in some capacity, or their reviewers, but at the same time, there is also the counter argument, well, if Michelin isn't going to go to states or cities whose tourism board don't pay them directly to review the restaurants, then what's the point? And I think that chef had a really good point. It's like, how many times do chefs have to go out and get this exposure at festivals or publications and give up something of themselves, of their restaurant, of their product, of their business, just to simply get noticed? And of course, you could argue that's the name of the game, and we're in hospitality, that's why we do this. For Michelin being such an integral part of the food industry, I personally find it a little, the best word is icky, like that a state, in order to get a rating, has to pay them however much money. If they're truly a guide based on great food, they are attached to a giant tire company. But if they are a guide truly worried about the best food no matter where, or trying to elevate cuisine, or trying to find the most impactful cuisine, especially in the United States, then they should go into Virginia without needing much payment. That's my personal opinion. Some can disagree, but it is interesting. I'll leave the link in the bio, but it is something that I think is worth noting because the state of Virginia not being included in the Michelin Guide for southern states is a big deal. Obviously Virginia is part of the South. It is something that could have repercussions for how southern food is represented, and there could be a lot of people that kind of miss the idea that elevated southern food doesn't live in Virginia. So I could definitely see all that go down. So it is unfortunate, but I also can commend and respect Virginia for not wanting to go ahead and pay this fee, especially with taxpayer dollars. So it's just it's a tough situation. My personal thought is that Michelin should be rating restaurants regardless if they get tourism board money or taxpayer money. That's just my opinion. I have a lot of issues with the Michelin Guide and what it feels and represents within the industry. I would love to hear your thoughts.